Welcome to 21st Century Dating Decoded. We're making modern love simple. Get ready to decode your love life. Brought to you by Speed Mingle.
Would you swipe left on your soulmate if you found out they voted differently than you? 10 years ago, political differences were a second date debate. Today, they're a hard deal breaker before you even make it to the first hello. Welcome back to 21st Century Dating Decoded, the show where we unravel the messy, fast-moving, and often hilarious reality of finding love in the digital age. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm Alice.
Today, we are embarking on a massive deep dive into a topic that touches, well, almost everyone listening to us right now. We are calling this deep dive Swiping Across the Aisle, How Partisanship is Killing Romance.
It's such a huge topic.
It really is. And I want you, the listener, to picture something for a second. You are sitting on your couch on a Tuesday night. You're thumbing through a dating app. You see a profile. Great smile. Loves the exact same obscure indie band you do.
Has a golden retriever.
Yes. Has a golden retriever. Crucial detail. You are hovering your thumb, getting ready to swipe right, and then your eyes drift down to the very bottom of their bio. And there is a tiny little icon, or maybe just a single emoji, that indicates they belong to a political camp you fundamentally disagree with. What do you do?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. And if you are like millions of other people in the modern dating pool, you probably recoil, you swipe left, and you never think about them again. It happens in literally a fraction of a second.
A split second.
But underneath that split-second decision is this massive, incredibly complex web of biology, technology, and sociology. And our mission today is to completely decode the biological, the digital, and the social forces that are essentially forcing us to date our political clones.
And hopefully figure out how to break out of the algorithm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to figure out why this happened, we're pulling from a really eclectic mix of sources today. We've got a fascinating Harvard study on the literal scent of political beliefs.
That one is wild.
So wild. We've got UC Irvine data on the rise of political breakups, University of Michigan relationship data sets, a Fox News psychotherapist op-ed, a Chicago Talks investigation into dating app filters, Stanford research on polarization, and surprisingly, a community events calendar from a rock radio station in Binghamton, New York.
A very unexpected source stack today.
Very. So whether you've ever deleted a match over a political meme or you're currently navigating a cross-party romance yourself, grab your coffee or, a stiff drink, because we are decoding it all today.
I feel like we just need to dive right into the deep end here. The modern dating landscape has completely transformed. It used to be that you wouldn't discuss politics, religion, or money until, at least the third date?
Yeah, it was considered totally impolite to bring it up early.
Right. Now, those topics are basically the bouncers at the door of your romantic life.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can get to the really wild evolutionary biology of attraction, we have to look at the conscious, surface-level ways people are filtering each other right now on their glowing screens. We are living in an era where politics has basically become a purity test.
Oh, absolutely a purity test.
If you open Hinge, Bumble, OkCupid, Tinder today, a person's profile isn't just a list of hobbies anymore. It's like a political manifesto.
And the shift has been incredibly rapid. I mean, it's well documented. If you look at data from the American Survey Center, OkCupid saw a massive 64% increase in political terms on user profiles almost immediately following the 2016 election.
64%.
Just instantly.
Just a massive spike. And then a 2017 study by eHarmony found that almost half of all their users were explicitly mentioning the president at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, either positively or negatively, it didn't matter. It went from being this background detail you might discover months into a relationship to the absolute headline of a person's romantic resume. Over half. That's wild. It's like people just decided to replace "I love hiking" with their voting record.
And more recent data shows this trend is only cementing itself. A recent SSRS survey found that over half of Democrats who use dating apps say that sharing political beliefs is a very important factor when picking a match.
Over half.
For Republicans and independents, that number hovers around a quarter. But across the board, you have millions of people using these apps to screen for ideological alignment before they even consider grabbing a cup of coffee with someone.
So we have this massive behavioral shift. Everyone is filtering, but why? Like, what is the psychology driving someone to treat a dating app like a ballot box? In our source material, we actually found two fiercely contrasting perspectives on this. And the first one views these filters purely through the lens of safety and survival.
Yeah, the Chicago Talks piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chicago Talks did this investigation, and they interviewed a young woman named Serna. She is an openly gay Mexican woman, And her perspective is that putting her politics front and center and demanding the exact same from her matches is absolutely not about finding a specific aesthetic type.
Right. It's not about finding someone who looks good on paper.
No, she sees it as a sheer necessity.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about facing homophobia, sexism, and racism in the real world, and she explicitly says, I cannot be with someone who goes against my safety.
And that perspective requires a profound reframing of what a dating profile actually is. For Cerna, the app's political filter is a proactive defense mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
She is blocking individuals whose political affiliations she associates with a direct threat to her existence, her rights, or her family's well-being. It is a digital shield.
A digital shield. That's a great way to put it. There was another user interviewed in that same Chicago Talks piece, a 20-year-old named Jade Wu. She echoes this sentiment perfectly.
Right, the baseline safety issue.
Yeah, she states that displaying your worldviews on a dating app is a baseline safety issue. For users like Cerna and Jade, a political label on a profile is a shorthand for moral safety. They aren't trying to find someone to debate tax policy with, They are trying to ensure the person sitting across the table won't invalidate their humanity.
And when you hear that, the logic is totally sound.
Totally sound.
If you feel marginalized, you use the tools available to protect yourself. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because we have another piece of source material that looks at the exact same phenomenon, the political bio, and draws a completely different conclusion.
Right, the Fox News op-ed.
Yes, we have this op-ed published on Fox News by a psychotherapist with 2 decades of clinical experience. And he completely challenges the idea that these bios are actually screening for safety or character.
His clinical analysis is incredibly sharp.
It really is. And it throws a total wrench into the whole shorthand for moral safety argument. He argues that a bio reading "No MAGA" or "feminist ally" isn't actually a functional character screening tool. Instead, he views it as a performance.
A performance for an audience.
Exactly. After 20 years of watching couples interact in his office, he points out that stating these things on an app has become about broadcasting your allegiance to an audience. He suggests that phrases like "science is real" or "trans rights are human rights" have transitioned.
How so?
Well, they used to be distinct political statements, but now they function more like social passwords. They announce which in-group you belong to before you've even introduced yourself.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Because dating is utterly exhausting. I mean, you, listening to this, you know the absolute fatigue of endless swiping. It feels like a second job.
Oh, it's draining.
So isn't a political filter just a highly efficient, time-saving proxy for finding shared morals? Like, if I know I value empathy, equity, and environmentalism, or if I know I value tradition, family, and self-reliance, why wouldn't I use a quick filter to weed out anyone who doesn't? It just seems like good time management.
It sounds perfectly logical in theory. It really does. But the psychotherapist completely dismantles that logic based on what actually destroys relationships in the real world.
Right, the real-world friction.
Exactly. Agreeing on complex geopolitical issues, let's say having the exact same stance on the conflict in Gaza or the intricacies of student loan forgiveness, that does absolutely nothing to predict how a partner will actually treat you during moments of intense domestic friction.
I see what you're saying. Having the same stance on a foreign policy issue doesn't mean they'll actually empty the dishwasher when you're exhausted or treat you with respect when you have a fight about finances.
And that is the core of his argument. A shared hatred of a political tribe is not a foundation for a marriage. It is a filter that efficiently screens out potentially decent, highly compatible people over a bumper sticker, while doing absolutely nothing to screen out the actual real-world red flags that destroy relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Being in the same political party does not magically prevent someone from lying to you, cheating on you, demonstrating contempt, or lacking the emotional maturity to apologize.
Right. A terrible partner is a terrible partner, regardless of how they vote.
That is the tragedy of the digital purity test. People become so intensely focused on the ideological addition that they completely miss the human being in front of them. They mistake a political label for personality trait, and they mistake ideological agreement for relational safety.
Which opens up a massive question. We've just seen how politics stops relationships from starting online. But how is this intense partisanship affecting the relationships that already exist out there in the real world? What happens when politics invades an established connection?
This is where we shift from dating apps to the broader social fabric, and the data becomes genuinely alarming. We need to explore a major study out of UC Irvine, published in the journal PNAS Nexus. The researchers, Mertken Günger and Peter Ditto, set out to measure the fracturing of the nation on a deeply personal level. To do this, they introduced a specific term to the academic literature: the political breakup.
A political breakup. Just to be perfectly clear for everyone listening, they define this as intentionally severing ties with someone, a friend, a family member, a romantic partner, or a coworker, explicitly over political differences. It's not just drifting apart. It is a conscious, politically motivated severing.
Right, an active cutoff.
And they look at a massive data set of nearly 3,800 participants. The numbers are staggering. 37% of Americans have experienced a political breakup.
It's wild.
Over a third of the country has cut someone out of their life or been cut out over politics.
Let's break down that 37%, because the dynamics of who we are cutting off are fascinating. Of the people who experienced a political breakup, 62% had a falling out with a friend.
62%.
Yeah. 40% cut ties with a family member, 29% with a coworker, and 10% with a romantic partner.
Wait, let me stop you there. Why are friends taking the biggest hit by such a huge margin? I mean, 62% is a massive chunk compared to the 10% of romantic partners or even the family members.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of relationship psychology, it makes complete sense. The researchers point out that friendships occupy a highly specific zone of vulnerability.
What do you mean?
You are close enough to a friend to actually discuss deep, controversial political beliefs, unlike, say, a casual acquaintance or a barista. But friendships lack the binding structural constraints of family or marriage.
I get it. It is significantly easier to block a friend's number or just stop inviting him to happy hour than it is to divorce your spouse or cut off an uncle who shows up to Thanksgiving every single year. You have the intimacy required to argue, but not the legal or familial glue required to stay and work it out.
Yes, exactly. And the ease with which we are severing these ties is accelerating dramatically.
Accelerating.
Oh, yeah. The researchers compared breakups stemming from the 2016 election cycle to the current 2024 election cycle. They found that the 2024 cycle surpassed the entire 2016 breakup rate in roughly half the time. The curve is just getting steeper.
I have to push back a little here, though. Whenever I hear data about things getting worse right now, I wonder about the timeline. Is it possible that this is just recency bias? Like, people are incredibly stressed about the current election cycle because it's happening right in front of them, so they're just over-reporting their breakups while forgetting the ones that happened 8 years ago.
It is a totally valid skepticism, but the UC Irvine researchers anticipated that exact critique.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, they specifically designed their follow-up analyses to rule out recency bias. They tracked panel participants longitudinally across multiple years, from 2020 through 2024, and the data showed a documented, steep, and continuous climb. This isn't a statistical illusion. This is the reality of a phenomenon political scientists call affective polarization.
Okay, let's define that for the listener. Affective polarization, meaning we don't just disagree with the other side on how tax brackets should work or how to handle zoning laws. We actively dislike and distrust them as human beings. The disagreement has moved from the intellectual to the emotional.
Precisely the distinction. And the data reveals a stark asymmetry in how this affective polarization plays out across the political spectrum.
Now remember, we are just looking at the sociological data impartially here.
Exactly, just the numbers. Looking purely at the data, 47% of Democrats reported having experienced a political breakup, compared to 29% of Republicans. Furthermore, among those who reported a split, Democrats initiated 66% of these breakups, compared to just 27% initiated by Republicans.
So, statistically speaking, individuals on the political left are much more likely to actively sever a relationship over politics than individuals on the political right. Again, we're not judging the morality of that choice, just observing the data. Some might argue it's a necessary boundary setting, while others might call it intolerance. But regardless of the justification, what is the actual psychological fallout of all this severing? What happens to the person who initiates the breakup?
This is perhaps the most dangerous part of the trend. The researchers found that people who initiate these breakups do not just move on and find peace.
They don't.
No, the act of severing the tie actually makes them significantly more hostile toward their political opponents. They report feeling colder toward everyday voters on the other side, and they begin assuming their opponents hold far more extreme views than they actually do. It creates a self-reinforcing loop.
It's like you cut someone off. And because you no longer have them in your life, to humanize the other side, to show you that a person can hold a different view but still be a good friend who helps you move a couch, The other side just becomes a cartoon villain in your head.
Yes, exactly. And the researchers stress that this trend is actively worsening an existing crisis.
Which is?
Well, the U.S. Surgeon General has officially labeled our current social climate an epidemic of loneliness. By burning these bridges over political differences, we are severing vital, everyday social ties. This fundamentally threatens not just the abstract concept of democracy, but the literal physical and mental health of everyday citizens who are becoming increasingly isolated in their ideological bunkers.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap where we are. We've established that we are consciously using dating apps to filter out political opponents before we even meet them. And we are actively breaking up with the friends and family already in our lives over politics. We like to tell ourselves we are making these highly evolved, conscious, intellectual choices to curate our social circles. But what if we aren't?
Right.
What if our bodies are actually making these choices for us before we even open our mouths to debate?
Here's where we pivot into the biology, and it completely reframes everything we just discussed. This brings us to a fascinating study out of Harvard's DAS repository.
Yes, authored by McDermott, Tingley, and Hedemi.
Right. It is titled Assortative Mating on Ideology Could Operate Through Olfactory Cues.
I was absolutely mind-blown by this research. Let's start with the baseline fact that prompted the study in the first place. Sociologists have long known about a concept called assortative mating. For the listener, assortative mating is just the scientific term for the fact that we tend to pair up with people who are similar to us in various ways. Education level, socioeconomic background, height, things like that.
It's the standard stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Harvard paper points out something incredible. Long-term mates correlate more highly on social and political attitudes, specifically a correlation between 0.60 to 0.75 than almost any other trait except religion.
And as the authors point out, religious similarity is incredibly easy to explain. People meet at church, at synagogue, at mosque. It's social homogamy and physical proximity. But political similarity in long-term couples is a genuine mystery.
Why isn't it a mystery?
Because studies consistently show that this political similarity does not come from convergence, meaning spouses don't just gradually adopt each other's political views over 20 years of marriage. They are remarkably politically similar from the very beginning.
Well,
Furthermore, it doesn't entirely come from conscious selection either, because historically, before the era of Hinge and OkCupid, people weren't listing their voting records in the classified ads.
right, you didn't have a bumper sticker on your Tinder profile in 1985.
Exactly. So if we aren't consciously selecting for it, and we aren't just conforming to each other over time, how on earth are politically aligned people finding each other?
And this is where the researchers theorized something that sounds like science fiction. That we might literally be smelling our political matches.
Smelling them, yes.
They set up an incredibly rigorous, blind olfactory experiment. I want to walk the listener through exactly how they did this, because the methodology is insane.
The experimental design is brilliant. They started by selecting 21 target subjects, 10 strong liberals and 11 strong conservatives. They had these targets tape Johnson & Johnson gauze pads to their underarms for 24 hours to collect their natural baseline body odor.
Wait, literally taping gauze to their armpits.
Literally. For 24 straight hours, they were stripped of everything that could possibly alter their natural scent. No perfumes, no deodorants, no smoking, no alcohol.
Oh, man.
They couldn't sleep in the same bed with pets. They couldn't have sex. They couldn't even eat spicy foods or garlic. They basically had to live like monks in a sensory deprivation chamber just to produce clinical-grade sweat.
I would fail that experiment immediately. But they had to do it to isolate the scent, right?
Yes, they needed to isolate the pure underlying biological scent signature, free from any environmental contaminants. Once they had the samples, they took the gauze pads, put them in individual vials, and froze them.
Okay, so then they bring in the smellers.
Right. A week later, they brought in 146 evaluators. These evaluators were entirely blind to the experiment's premise. They had no idea who the targets were, they couldn't see them, couldn't hear their voices, and had zero visual or verbal clues about their political ideologies. Their one and only job was to smell the vials and rate how physically and sexually attractive the body odor was.
And just to make sure their noses didn't go completely numb after smelling 5 random armpits, the researchers had the evaluators sniff peppermint oil between each sample. This was to prevent what they call subject fatigue.
A palate cleanser for sweat.
Exactly. So imagine this. You smell a vial of sweat, you rate it on a clipboard, you take a hit of peppermint oil to cleanse the palate, and then you smell the next vial of sweat. What was the big reveal?
The results were statistically significant and stunning. The evaluators were consistently more attracted to the scent of their ideological concomitants.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, without knowing a single conscious thing about the person in the vial, they found the body odor of people who shared their own political ideology to be far more attractive.
I cannot get over the specific anecdote they included in the paper. There was a vial of sweat from a strongly politically aligned male. One female evaluator smelled it and literally asked the researchers if she could take it home because she thought it smelled like the best perfume.
That is so crazy.
But then, a female evaluator from the opposing political party smelled the exact same vial just moments later and rated it as rancid. She actually told the researchers she thought the sample had gone bad.
It is a stunning demonstration of visceral biological polarization. The exact same chemical stimulus is processed as a glorious perfume by an ideological ally and as a disgusting rancid odor by an ideological opponent.
So wait, let me process this. When I'm on a date and I'm sitting there at a candlelit table asking them about their stance on healthcare policy or tax reform, my nose is actually running a millions of years old biological background check in the background.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that is exactly what is happening. And the neuroscience behind why this happens is fascinating. It has to do with the physical wiring of your brain. Most of your senses, your sight, your hearing, your sense of touch, are routed through a part of the brain called the thalamus. Think of the thalamus as the brain's switchboard. It receives the signal, processes it, and sends it to the conscious part of your brain to think about. But your olfactory bulb, the part of the brain that processes smell, bypasses the switchboard entirely. It is wired directly into the amygdala and the hippocampus.
The amygdala and hippocampus, those are the emotional and memory centers of the brain, right? The primal centers.
Yes. Evolution privileged the speed of smell above almost everything else. Smell alerts you to immediate danger, to rotting food, to invisible pathogens, and to mating opportunities before you even have time to consciously process a thought. And a massive part of this invisible chemical communication involves something called the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC.
Okay, let's break down MHC for the listener. This is essentially the genetic code that dictates our immune system, right?
Correct. Humans can subconsciously detect MHC peptides in another person's body odor. Generally speaking, we are attracted to people whose MHC offers an optimal immune complement to our own. If you have different immune strength than your partner, your offspring will have a broader, stronger immune system.
Makes sense.
But the Harvard researchers theorized that these smell signals communicate much deeper social and behavioral compatibility. Things like disgust sensitivity, how easily you're grossed out by pathogens, strange foods, or norm violations, are deeply tied to the neural substrates of smell. And high disgust sensitivity happens to be heavily correlated with conservative political views, especially regarding traditional morality, boundaries, and reproduction. Lower disgust sensitivity is often correlated with more liberal, openness to experience traits.
So nature is basically stacking the deck behind our backs.
I'd take it a step further. Nature isn't just stacking the deck. Nature is rigging the entire game to make politically and socially similar people smell incredibly good to each other.
But why?
Because from a brutal evolutionary standpoint, if two parents share foundational values about the world, about what is dangerous, about how to interact with strangers, about how to rear children, they're going to fight less. They're going to provide a uniform, stable parenting strategy which drastically optimizes the chances of their offspring surviving and thriving. Ideological alignment reduces domestic infighting and builds a stronger, more cohesive micro-community.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. Evolution hardwired us to be physically attracted to people who share our foundational worldview because it makes for better, more cohesive child rearing. It draws us to compatible partners naturally through scent. But here's the massive contradiction that brings us to the next part of our deep dive. If our biology is so perfectly designed to naturally sort us into compatible pairs through an invisible scent radar, why are we experiencing this massive crisis of loneliness, political breakups, and dating app misery? Why isn't biology saving us?
Because the digital age has completely hijacked our ancient hardware. We took a system that evolved for face-to-face interaction and shoved it behind a piece of glass. This is where we need to look at the University of Michigan study and the broader sociological data on the current generation of daters.
Right. The Michigan study looked at over 4,000 individuals and found that despite all this extreme polarization we talk about on the news, 23% of couples were actually cross-partisan.
Right.
People can and do date across the aisle. However, extreme opposites, like A strong, highly engaged Democrat marrying a strong, highly engaged Republican made up fewer than 8% of couples. Most people are clustering with their own, but there is some middle ground.
The true crisis, however, isn't necessarily playing out among older generations who established their relationships before algorithms took over. The crisis is happening among the youngest cohort of daters, Gen Z, who have quite literally never known a dating world that wasn't mediated by the internet.
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
We are seeing a massive rise in a phenomenon sociologists call heteropessimism. This is a deep, pervasive distrust, exhaustion, and cynicism regarding heterosexual relationships. And much of this heteropessimism is being fueled directly by algorithmic warfare.
Again, we have to look at this data impartially, without judgment. We are just reporting the sociological friction points that are tearing up the modern dating pool. And the data shows a stark, frankly shocking generational divide, particularly regarding gender roles. Let's look at the numbers. 24% of Gen Z men believe women shouldn't be too independent, compared to only 12% of boomer men.
Wow.
31% of Gen Z men think a wife should explicitly obey her husband, and 21% believe women should never initiate intimacy.
These are dramatic regressions toward hyper-traditionalism in a very young demographic. You would expect the youngest generation to be the most progressive on gender roles, but the opposite is happening. And where is this coming from? It is deeply tied to the online manosphere, a massive, highly lucrative network of blogs, podcasts, forums, and influencers that promote rigid masculinity, alpha-beta dynamics, and often outright misogyny.
It is a tragic irony when you look at how the tech platforms operate. The algorithms on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, they are completely amoral. They don't care about your happiness. They are designed purely for engagement. They want your eyes on the screen. So what drives engagement? Outrage.
Outrage always wins online.
Always. The algorithms serve highly controversial, traditionalist, or misogynistic content to young men because it generates clicks, angry comments, and watch time. Simultaneously, those exact same algorithms are looking at young women's phones and serving them hateful, cautionary, men are dangerous narcissists content for the exact same reason. It keeps them watching out of fear.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of dating, the result is devastating. You have an entire generation of young men being radicalized into these rigid traditionalist views, convinced that modern women are the enemy. And you have an entire generation of young women being socialized online to view every man they encounter as a potential statistical threat.
It's like an algorithm is acting as a bouncer at a nightclub. But instead of checking IDs to keep everyone safe, the bouncer pulls you aside and whispers in your ear that everyone inside the club hates you, wants to hurt you, and is your mortal enemy. And he does this before you even walk through the door and get a chance to use your natural scent radar to judge them for yourself.
That is an incredible analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates why the biological aspect is failing us right now. Because our modern dating is now entirely internet-mediated, we completely lack the social glue of what sociologists call proximal somatic verification.
Proximal somatic verification. Let's translate that for the listener. That essentially means actually being physically close enough to a human being to smell them, to read their microexpressions, to see if their eyes crinkle when they laugh, and to feel their physical presence in a room.
Yes, exactly. For millions of years, if you met someone from a neighboring tribe who had slightly different customs or views, your olfactory system and your physical intuition would kick in. Your body would run that background check we talked about. Your amygdala would say, this person smells safe. Their MHC is compatible. They are smiling genuinely. They are not a threat.
Right.
But on a dating app, you cannot smell a carefully curated profile picture.
Yeah.
You cannot get an MHC reading through an iPhone screen. You cannot read microexpressions from a text message.
So because we are totally deprived of that ancient biological safety check, we panic and we substitute it with something else.
We substitute the biological safety check with rigid, conscious, ideological filters. We demand that people prove they are safe by checking a box on their profile or putting the correct slogan in their bio. We use political litmus tests for the safety that physical intuition used to provide effortlessly.
Which leads to?
It leads to a total collapse in connection. Young men are reporting record numbers of zero sexual partners, and young women are viewing minor conversational yellow flags on dates as definitive, dangerous red flags. We are judging two-dimensional caricatures instead of three-dimensional humans, and we are rejecting them before they can even speak.
So we find ourselves in this perfect storm. Our biology desperately wants us to connect based on deep, invisible physical cues. Our digital platforms force us to connect based on rigid, hyperpolarized, text-based labels. And the algorithms powering our daily lives are actively making us terrified of each other before we even meet. How on earth do we bypass this algorithmic warfare? If our biology is the solution, how do we let our natural biological sorting mechanisms actually do their job again?
Well, to find the answer, we actually have to look to the most incredibly unlikely source from our stack today. But first, let's anchor this solution in the research of Neil Malhotra at Stanford. He noted that polarization at the highest, most toxic levels of our political system actually stems from people's everyday, mundane unwillingness to communicate with one another in their local communities.
Right.
And this deeply extends into our romantic choices. The macro-level polarization starts in our living rooms, our neighborhoods, and our dating lives.
And this brings us to the ultimate grounding mechanism we found in the research. I have to admit, when I saw this in our source material, I laughed out loud. I was so confused.
Yeah.
After Harvard genetics and Stanford sociology, our final piece of evidence is the community events calendar from Magic 101.7, a classic rock hits radio station in Binghamton, New York.
I know it seems entirely out of place, but I promise you it is actually the most practical, real-world application of all the dense theory we've discussed today. Look at the specific events listed on this local Binghamton calendar. You have Binghamton Community Night at St. Paul's Church, you have a backpack and bike helmet giveaway at the Little Italy Endicott Farmers Market, and you have National Night Out at Fairview Park.
Wait, I have to stop you. Are you seriously suggesting that the cure for the deep biological and digital crisis of modern dating, the cure for heteropessimism and algorithmic radicalization, is standing in line for a free backpack at a farmer's market in upstate New York?
I am passionately defending this exact idea because we have to ask ourselves, what do these mundane, boring, uncurated local events actually represent? They represent the vital offline public square.
Okay, I'm listening. Unpack the public square for me. Why is a park better than an app?
Think about the fundamental architecture of these spaces. You cannot put a digital filter on a public park. When you go to a farmer's market to buy tomatoes, or you go to a community night to get a bike helmet for your kid, you cannot pre-screen the crowd. You cannot swipe left on the guy selling carrots. You cannot ban someone from the park because they have a political bumper sticker on their truck that you disagree with.
Right, you just thrust into a physical space with your actual neighbors, regardless of who they voted for.
And that physical proximity forces you to interact with multidimensional human beings. You might end up laughing at a loose dog, or chatting about the terrible weather, or helping someone pick up a dropped bag of apples with someone who votes entirely differently than you. And in that physical, offline, uncurated space, your olfactory system, your millions of years old biological background check, is finally allowed to engage properly.
So by being in the park, you bypass the algorithm.
You entirely bypass the manufactured or threat detection loop of the digital world. You're taking in their scent, their tone of voice, the way they hold their posture, their physical demeanor. Your amygdala realizes that this person standing in front of you is not the terrifying, radicalized caricature that your TikTok feed promised it would be. They're just a person buying vegetables. By returning to these uncurated offline spaces, like the ones promoted by a random rock station in Binghamton, we re-engage the ancient hardware that kept humanity connected for millennia. We allow biology to override the algorithm.
Wow, it really is that simple. And yet it feels like the hardest thing for us to do right now. Just put the phone down, walk out the front door, and go stand in a park with strangers. So where does that leave us? Is political polarization really the death knell for modern romance? Or are we just letting algorithms and hyperpartisanship build walls where a little human curiosity used to be? Look, no one is saying you have to compromise on your core values or date someone whose worldview invalidates your existence. But if this deep dive into the data proved anything today, it's that a profile badge or a single survey answer rarely tells the whole story of who a person is when you sit across from them at a coffee shop. Next time you're swiping, ask yourself, are you looking for a soulmate or a political echo chamber with a cute smile? Because if we only swipe on people who mirror our exact feed, we might just be locking out the very real, messy, beautiful connections that make dating worth the trouble in the first place.
And that leaves us with one final, frankly terrifying implication of all this research to consider, a thought experiment for the listener to take with them. If we actually succeed in perfectly curating our romantic lives so that we only ever mate with our exact political and ideological clones, a trend we see accelerating every single year on these apps, are we inadvertently engineering an evolutionary dead end?
An evolutionary dead end. Explain that.
Think about it from a purely biological standpoint. By eliminating all ideological, social, and genetic friction in our partnerships, by ensuring we never have to compromise or understand a conflicting viewpoint in our homes, we might just be breeding out the very cognitive diversity and resilience that allowed humanity to survive in the first place. A species that only ever agrees with itself is highly vulnerable to a changing environment. Something to chew on.
That is an incredible thought to leave on. Are we filtering ourselves into extinction? Honestly, escaping that digital echo chamber and avoiding that evolutionary dead end is exactly why 21st Century Dating Decoded partners with SpeedMingle. They are a service fundamentally designed to solve the exact problem we spent the last hour breaking down. They get you off the apps and into the real world where your biology can actually do its job.
SpeedMingle is operating with this exact philosophy of proximal somatic verification in mind. They understand that you need physical presence. They offer 6 distinct modalities to create intentional physical connection without the algorithmic pressure.
Right.
For instance, they have SpeedMingle Anywhere for authentic video interactions if you are traveling, and SpeedMingle Social for relaxed, unstructured gatherings at local venues.
I love their event structures. They also have SpeedMingle happenings, which are highly curated activity-based events. So if you hate awkward small talk over a drink, you can go do an activity and let your guard down. And my personal favorite is SpeedMingle Neighbors. It's designed to turn local strangers into friends through high-energy events right in your own community, just like those Binghamton community nights we talked about. There's absolutely no romance required at the Neighbors events, just great vibes and community building to fight that loneliness epidemic.
Plus, they offer SpeedMingle B2B for high-octane professional networking, which takes the same principles of offline connection into the business world. And coming in summer 2026, they are launching SpeedMingle One-to-One for personalized, low-pressure individual meetings.
So we want you to take the initiative today, break the algorithm. We want you to subscribe to 21st Century Dating Decoded so you never miss a deep dive like this one. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your audio. Or, if you prefer visual content, you can watch us on SpeedMingle TV, on YouTube, Roku, or Amazon Fire TV.
And please, leave us a 5-star review and share this link with a friend, especially the friend who is still using expired digital filters on our dating profile while constantly complaining that they can't find anyone real.
Seriously, send them the link right now. And most importantly, secure a reservation at an upcoming SpeedMingle event in your area to mix, match, and mingle in person. If there isn't an event nearby, don't just go back to swiping. Contact SpeedMingle directly to become a host, or set up an event venue in your own town. Build the public square yourself, because as we learned today, sometimes you just need to get out there and see and smell the real world for yourself.
The digital X-ray machine of modern dating might be fundamentally broken, but your biology certainly isn't. You just have to give it a chance to work.
See you next time.
Thanks for watching and listening to the SpeedMingle Network.